right, back of the pack ultra guy here. I'm really excited for this episode. Um, I do know this guest a little bit. We have a little bit of history together, which we'll probably obviously get into later on, and some funny stories about that we'll probably share back and forth about how we met. But without further ado, we have Lance Harpe on the call today. Um, like I said, have visited with Lance for a few hours during Cocodona together, and I was just super impressed by his story. Also impressed by the fact that when we got to Prescott, or I can't, Friendly Pines, I think it was, he was just gone. He's like, okay, see ya. And then we caught up later on in the race, but I was just like, God, he's moving so good. So without further ado, we have Lance on the podcast today. Lance, well, how we like to get started is just a little bit about yourself. Not when you were 5, you spilt the cup of milk, but just where you grew up, how you found athletics. Did you get involved young in school? And then just kind of on to how you found ultra.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Lance. Thanks for inviting me, Christian. I certainly appreciate it. Looking forward to this conversation. So for running and me, I grew up in a pretty active household, in a military family, right? So watching my dad doing races, racing bicycles, running, and kind of getting after it a little bit myself. But it wasn't probably until about in high school when I was just channel surfing one day and I came across the Ironman World Championship being broadcast. And that's kind of when I first saw like these stories that were being presented and that production that Ironman puts on. And it's like, man, triathlon, like that looks amazing, right? That's something I want to do. And so I saw that in like my sophomore year. So um, and I couldn't quite like go out for the cross country team because they practiced pretty early in the morning, and I lived quite a ways from my high school. So I couldn't make it there in time. But in my senior year, they transitioned their time to be after school practices. So I started running cross country in my senior year. I started swimming in my senior year, and then I always rode bicycles growing up. So um, when I was in high school doing the cross country, I really started enjoying running. That was probably my favorite part. And started kind of running in what at the time I thought was like long distance stuff, half marathons. Much to the chagrin of my cross country coach doing some of the longer stuff. She wasn't a fan of that. But that's where I found a lot of the enjoyment. So I kind of made a deal with her that I just did the one half marathon. I would wait till after the season to kind of to do some more. And from that point on, after high school, I kept getting more interested in triathlon. Ended up joining the military myself, and still interested in triathlon. But I was underway, stationed on a submarine for a while, and at that point, I met a buddy, and he's like, "Hey, we're not doing anything. Like, have you read this book, right?" And he hands me a copy of Born to Run. And that's the first time I heard about ultra marathons, right? Was um, on board, right? And by the time I got off from that deployment, I was like full blown, like I got to do this. This is something I really want to do. I found a race that was just up the street from where I was stationed. It's still going on. It's called the Lumberjack Endurance Runs up in Port Gamble, Washington. They had a 50 mile, 100K, and a 100 mile. And I was like, I mean, I was pretty fit at the time. I was doing a lot of running and stuff, what I thought was a lot of running. And like my long run was like 6 or 7 miles, right? I was crushing it. And, I didn't own a pair of trail shoes. This was in 2012. Um, and so I signed up for the 50 mile and I showed up there and it was 4 12.5 mile loops in my road shoes, no water bottle. The aid stations were 4 miles apart. I thought, what could go wrong? Like I run road races all the time. 4 miles is no big deal, right? Not used to what the trails, what type of toll that would take on my body, or factoring elevation or none of that stuff, right? And it was a pretty miserable experience, right? But there's learnings in every race that we do. No matter if it's your first ultra or your 50th ultra, there's always a lesson to be learned, right? And I learned a lot that day, right? But one of the biggest takeaways was the community, right? Like I was only halfway through the lap before some of the guys I was running with, like they sniffed me out pretty quick that this was my first one without me actually saying it, right? And they're like, it was probably the no water bottle, it, the no nutrition, the nothing, right? And they're like, hey, you can borrow. I've got an extra one just sitting in my car, right? As we come around for this lap, right? You can grab that. You know, I thought I would finish this before the sun went down, so I had no headlamp or nothing like that, right? They're like, oh, you can borrow this, right? Um, but I mean, like how most ultras go, that you don't respect the distance. In this case, maybe it was a little bit of ignorance, right? Injury kind of set in at about the 30-mile part, and I walked the last 7.5 miles, kind of limping, moving really slow. The sun was starting to set a little bit, and I just wasn't having fun, right? Um, so I decided to take a DNF, right, for my first one. So I made it 37.5 miles. Um, you know, and I was kind of okay with that, right? Like I was
Yeah.
happy with my performance, but like I felt like I'd gotten my fill. And at that point, I kind of shifted back more into triathlon, and that's kind of where it stayed till about 2017 when I moved back to Washington State after I was out of the military. Um, and we had a local race here called the Badger Mountain Challenge. They had a 50K, and I was running with a buddy from work, and we decided that hey, this is a great one to kind of to do again, right? So kind of dove back into the ultra world 5 years later and actually trained properly this time. I started looking at YouTube videos and seeing what other resources were out there and realized there was some specialty gear, right? Vests and different training methodologies, right? And like you didn't have to run every single uphill. Um, and I
Right.
started having a good time training on the trails, right? I started realizing just how much more enjoyable, more welcoming the community was. With triathlon, no offense to that community, right? But it's different than
Mhm.
the trail world, right? They're very concerned with their splits when they're running, right? And that's about the only time you can really even talk and converse with people anyway, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't chit chat with them on the bike, and you certainly can't do it in the swim. And I'm a social butterfly, and it was so much more enjoyable to be on the trails, right? Um, so in 2017, I started phasing out of the triathlon world and got deeper into ultra, and that's kind of and I think 2018 was the last time I've ran a triathlon. I sold my bike, my triathlon bike, and a few years ago, and yeah, I don't miss it at all. So, yep, fully invested in trails nowadays. Had a very traditional build up through the distances, 50Ks, then 50-mile, 100K. And in 2020, I was set to run my first 100 miler. And we all know kind of what happened in 2020, right? A lot of the races got canceled. Um,
Mhm.
and I think myself and a lot of people kind of suffered mentally from a lot of races being canceled, right? The world kind of changing. And after about the fourth 100 miler that I was certain would happen, right, got canceled, I finally just threw up my hands in frustration one day and said, you know what, even if I have to run around my neighborhood on pavement, like I'm going to run 100 miles, like I'm going to do it, right? And some I started thinking, I'm like, that sounds terrible. Like, what are some ways to hold myself accountable? So I did it. I raised some money for our local food bank and bunch of donations. So my first 100 miler was I did 147 laps around my neighborhood on pavement,
Wow.
which was miserable. Um, and then never again, right? So all the hundreds I've done since then have all been on proper trails, right? Very enjoyable. And then I did my first 200, the Moab 240 in 2022. And I think that's really where I found my calling. And I'm not saying I'm good at 200s, right? But I'm better at it than anything than the other distances, at least performance wise, right? If you look at the standings. So I really enjoyed the 200-mile distance. In a lot of ways, I think it's easier than running a mountain 100. 100 milers are hard, and 200s, like the pace is so much more relaxed. Like um, if I have a goal from this podcast and just for my running associates with friends and with other people, it's to kind of like maybe make the 200-mile distance not seem as scary as what a lot of people think that it is, right? Um, and so I just did my fifth 200-mile plus distance. I ran the Arizona Monster, a week and a half ago, and had a great experience down there. And I think that's kind of takes me up to where I am today.
All right on. So I know that at some point, based off of our conversations together previous, you got married and started a family. At what point in that journey did that take place that you were just
Yeah,
describing?
I got married quite young. I got married when I was 20 years old, um, and it was before. So I was in the Navy, but I was a reservist at the time. Um, and I married a gal from here where we're currently living now, and she'd never been very far, right? She was kind of a local girl, and we got married. I went back on active duty, and we went down to South Carolina for a couple years, and then over to the other side of the state, and it was probably so she's kind of always seen this progression from kind of eccentric Lance, right, with a lot of hobbies to starting to see kind of how deep the rabbit hole goes with some of my some of my passions,
Yeah.
whether it's running or collecting Japanese maples or any of that stuff, right? Like when I find something, I kind of go all in on it.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to bring that up is because it is a big part of life, obviously, and it does start to change things. It does start to change your training schedules, and especially if children come along, that really changes. Your how you're going to train, your timing. So it adds complexity to it, and
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think a lot of people relate to that. I know for me today, last night I took my wife to a concert in Tucson, so we drove 2 hours to Tucson from where we live in the Phoenix area,
Yep.
and then 2 hours back home. I was home. We were in bed by like 1, and I not getting up in the morning to run because I didn't have time to, in the morning, family stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm doing the run in the afternoon, which is good because heat training and things like that. But those complexities, not that they're bad, but they definitely change the way that you train. So that's why I like to bring that up, and I like that you brought up the fact that she's seen eccentric Lance, all these different versions of you. Um, what do you think she would say if you came and said, "Hey, there's a 400-mile race," or she probably
at
wouldn't even doubt
at
it.
this point, she's not even surprised, right?
Yeah.
No, I think she's realized at this point kind of what she's gotten herself into. But we've always had a very good relationship, and but with all young married people, I get actually doesn't even need to be young. With all married people, right? When they get newly married, they start finding out what some of their difficulties are that they have to work through, right? And I think proper communication, especially with training, is is probably the most important thing, right? It took me quite a few years, right, of getting in trouble, right, of trying to make this balance, right, of working all the time with little kids in the house, with my commitments as a husband, as a father, as a working person, right, but also someone who wanted to train, right, and ultimately that communication of, hey, what works best for you? And this is what my needs are. And somewhere in there, there's common ground. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas before, when I was getting in trouble, it was like, okay, I had a hard day at work. See you later. I know I've been gone for the last 36 hours, right? I got to go for a run or I'm going to go crazy, right? But like, what about her needs? What about,
Yes.
I mean, she's been home with kids for the last 36 hours while you've been on the submarine. So what, what about, maybe she's going crazy, you know? So communication solved a lot of those issues. And I mean, few and far between now are the butting heads of the training versus commitments. So
Yeah.
if that's my biggest piece of advice, right, is just talk, figure out
Yeah.
what their needs are, and prioritize that. It's
Yeah.
more important than training. I can tell you
Yeah.
right now, like
Yes.
doing this stuff is great, but like your family, right, and your other commitments are probably more important than you running through the mountains. Um, and you'd be surprised that you can actually probably balance all those things when you really just figure out it's not necessarily all about you.
Yeah.
Like when you're out there racing, right? It's probably one of the most selfish things that we can do in the sense of like it's a very intimate thing. Like you're checking in with your body. Um, you're trying to figure out, you're asking it to do things that you probably didn't ask it to do in training. Like you didn't go out and run 300 miles, but now you're running the Arizona Monster 300. So you're asking it to do certain things. It's all about you, right? And maybe you're lucky enough to have crew and pacers who are always focused on what your needs are. You've got awesome volunteers at every race, right? They're always focused on you, right? Um, and that's great. That's exactly how a race should be. Um, but in training, it's not all about you, right? You need to
Yeah.
balance that. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of my biggest thing, right? Is remember what's important. And then celebrate the times when you can be selfish out there during your race. That's your time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed when I was just starting out in ultra, uh, and getting into the training and communication, I would say I'm going to go for a run, but there was never any like expectation of timing or
Yeah.
and then so you're like she would be like, hey, where are you okay, like where are you? You know? Well, I'm somewhere in the trail system, I'll be home in you know 15 minutes. Well, that was if I'm running like an 8:30 pace, to get
Yeah.
back to the
Yep.
car. So that communication, I think, is so crucial, where those expectations are set beforehand. Whatever partnership you're in life,
Yep.
those expectations are set, communicated, and it really helps alleviate a lot of stress. But I like what you said about looking at it from your partner, your wife's, expectation, or sorry, not expectation, from her viewpoint, right? Like, I've been home all day. Maybe I need to go for a run.
Yeah. No.
Maybe I need to get out. So that's a good piece of advice. I'm glad you shared that. I also wanted to tell you, I was pacing my buddy at the Monster, and I was watching you on the tracker. I was like, "Yeah, he's doing so good." And you did really well. I
Yeah.
believe you placed 10th. Is that
Yeah. I
correct?
finished in the top 10, which is my best performance in a 200 up to this point. I really was going into this with a lot of lessons learned from the previous 200s. I just wanted to put it all together and really like try to be efficient, but not at the expense of the experience. I run these things to have fun, right? I'm not a guy who's ever stood on a podium before. I don't expect to ever be the guy that stands on a podium. But at the same time, like I also want to challenge myself and maybe put to the test the lessons that I've learned over those times and see how efficient I can be. And I had a great race. A lot of things went right. I didn't realize I was so close to the top 10 till I was on top of Mount Lemon and I had a buddy call me and say, "Hey man, you're right around 13th place."
Wow.
And that was surprising, right? That was kind of that first moment when I realized that, hey, I might be able to do something special this time. Um, and even then, it still kind of came down to the wire. It wasn't till like the last probably 50 kilometers that um, I said, okay, well, it's time to maybe sacrifice the experience a little bit and dig a little deep and ask my body to do things that I would not normally ask it to do in a 200-mile race. Normally, I play it smart with I have A, B, and C goals. C goals always to finish. These 200s cost a lot of money. They're a huge investment. I certainly don't want to not finish the race because of decisions I made whether they were correct or incorrect during the race. Um, but with 50 kilometers to go and sitting right at like 10th or 11th, I think I was actually in like 12th place with 50 kilometers to go. It's like, I think this is a possibility, but we're going to have to take some risks. And that's the decision I chose to make, right? And in the last 15 miles, I set a lot of Strava top 10s on some segments, right? Which is really strange to see. I don't even typically set those in training, much less in the last 10 miles of a 300
Right.
mile race. Um, so I was running scared, trying to secure that top 10 place. There was faster runners behind me. And before that, those last 10 miles, I felt like maybe I could have went another 50 to 100 miles. But after burning those matches and asking my body to do something that I hadn't done that whole race, right? Like I crossed that finish line. I'm not sure I could have done another 20 miles. Like I was toast.
You
So
left it all out there. I love it.
yeah.
So the only experience I had at the Monster was pacing. I paced from Zimmerman to Casablanca,
Okay. Yeah.
and I
That was
that is a
last tough section.
those are that was a tough course. So
Yeah. I don't know if you did that last 22 miles into Casablanca in the daytime,
that was
but
at
it
night.
was, oh, it was at night. Okay. So I can only imagine that it's a totally different course at night. During the day, that 22 miles, it's all exposed with tons of gain, and it was
Yes.
hot. It was so hot coming through
I was
there.
thinking about you guys that were going to be going into the day because that's a big stretch between aid stations in the Arizona heat, fully exposed. And I would have run out of water if it was been. I mean, I ran out of water.
Yeah.
I ran low on water at night. I can't imagine running,
Yeah,
during the day.
I was carrying 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. So I carried 3 liters, and I rationed that 3 liters. And I used a lot of my previous experience to kind of know what 22 miles with 3 liters, how to ration that. And I pulled into the aid station with about 4 or 5 ounces left out of those 3 liters. And it was all in the day, and it was heat of the day. Um, and so the first thing I did when I got in there is I went up to the medic. I'm like, hey, they're not telling people at the previous aid station that they need to carry more water, but that's a minimum 4 liter carry. Like,
Yeah,
and I don't drink hardly at all compared to like some people. Like I'm on the lighter side, and I went through essentially 3 liters with rationing. So 4 was kind of like a bare minimum for that last section in the
yeah.
daytime. You could probably get by with 3 at night, but
It reminded me a lot of that first
exactly.
50K of Cocodona, where it's like there's you're just really
Yeah,
rationing water. In my
exactly.
case, I
I
was
carried four
filtering.
liters in that first 50K, and I had to ration water less during Cocodona than I did in his last 22 miles. And I think that has to do with with where that stretch is. It's at the beginning. You're probably relatively hydrated at the beginning of Cocodona. At this one, you're on day 4.5
Yeah,
minimum, or all the way up to day 7 for some of the people that are grinding out in the back. And I mean, you're in all sorts of states of disarray. And I think that's why it maybe felt a little bit harder
yeah.
than that Cocodona section. Plus, I think rightly so that section gets a lot of respect at Cocodona. Um, I think it is a little bit exaggerated. There's a lot of fear that they put into people about that first section, right? So, like I'm still part of that Facebook group, and there's people on there talking about carrying 7 to 8 liters of water. I just think that's insane. That's so much weight.
Yeah,
But also if those are your consumption needs, right, and you need 7 to 8 liters, then I'm not going to tell you not to take it.
yeah.
But like, if you've never carried 7 to 8 liters of water in a race, like you should probably strap up and see what that feels like, because
Yeah,
that's a lot of weight.
that's pretty heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't realize how heavy the water is until you fill all your bladders up,
yeah.
and then you put it on your back, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's kind of heavy.
Like I remember carrying the 4 liters and just all the gear, thinking this pack is insanely heavy,
Yeah,
and people are talking about carrying double that. It's like, holy crap, were you carrying like a hiker's backpack or something,
yeah.
right? Like, where are you putting it all? So,
Well, we must have different consumption needs because I drink a lot of water.
Yeah,
So
no, everybody's different, right?
yeah,
And that's definitely something you need to figure out before you go run in Arizona. I'm not from Arizona. The Arizona Monster was the second time I've ever ran there. I love running in Arizona, but you need to understand what your needs are for where you're going to
yeah,
be running, you know?
for sure. I think that's important too. That not only training, but factoring in where you're going. Because if I came up to you in the northwest to race, I would have a very different experience. I've raced in Oregon with my dad at the SOB at Mount
Hmm.
Ashland in Oregon, and it's a different experience. Or if I went down to a humid place, I'd have to prepare for that because
Yep.
there's zero humidity where I am in Arizona. So
Yeah.
those are huge factors that I, I've been guilty of kind of overlooking. So
Yeah.
um, 10th place is awesome. I mean, I was so I've been so amazed watching those runners the whole time. I was lucky enough to be involved like I was for those long stretches and see the guys go through, and it was awesome. But what I wanted to kind of go back a little bit. So one thing that I wanted to focus on is how open and friendly you are when you're out on the course. And you touched on that a little bit when you talked about Ironman. And in fact, my last guest and I were talking about that too, about how it's hard to have those conversations and make those relationships when you are doing a triathlon. You know, to be fair, it is a little hard, but there's a definitely different feel. And so I can attest to, how open and friendly you are during races because that's how we met. We met right after Crown King Aid Station
Yeah.
in
Right. Sunset.
Cocodona. Yeah, sunset. I came around a corner and you were getting your headlamps out and getting your lights going, and we went for a good while together. It was kind of fun because I don't know if you remember this, or tell me if I.
You have a great memory, Christian. You're blowing me away, man.
Well, do you remember when we were going and you're like, "Hey, turn your headlamp off," and we turned our lights off, and you could the stars and the moon was so bright you could see the
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, we had a full moon, and I've noticed that if you're on a big wide road like that, with the lights off, you get better depth perception. You can see the rocks. You trip less. I've noticed that you get less tired also. Like maybe you wake up a little bit more, right? Because your senses kind of kick into overdrive, right? They go out of this narrow cone of light that your headlamp's casting to now the whole world opens up around you. So I've noticed I wake up a little bit more. Um, Everything kind of quiets down. It's interesting, but you got to have the right conditions to do it. You can't do it obviously on technical single track, and you got to have
Yeah,
a full moon. But if you
no,
ever
it
find
was
yourself
a
out and
perfect
you're doing
storm.
some training, right, do it every time, right? It's amazing.
It was such a cool experience because I've done a Ragnar race years and years and years ago, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't bring a headlamp, but I had a full moon, and for part of the race, it was like you said, it was a wider road, so I could see where I was going. So, but to do it during Cocodona at night and then with someone else, it was really fun to go on that. It was a fire road,
Yep.
um, and and just utilize nature's own light. It was really a really special experience. I enjoyed it. But what I did want to focus on is um, you were just so open and friendly, and we were just chatting, and we got to know each other a little bit. And I was so glad that I had you because when you're going along between Crown King and Camp Kippa, and you kind of talked about this a little bit, how they scare you about the first 50K, 11,000 feet of climb, no water, the depths of Mordor, you're going to die,
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
forget to tell you about the climb to Camp Kippa.
Yeah. No, in that
That,
first 100K, you have 15,000 feet of gain in that first
yeah,
100K. That's I mean, you're hard pressed to find any 100K race that has 15,000 feet of gain. Um,
It's
it
yeah,
will easily be one of the hardest first 100K. So yeah, it's just like you said, like they really kind of pack on that difficulty of those first 35 miles or 37 miles, but it's really those first 62 miles that'll get
yeah.
you.
And I remember we were climbing up that hill to Camp Kippa, and at one point you said, "Hey man, I let's take a quick break." And I was like, "I'm so glad he just said that because I needed a break so bad. I was so tired. I was a rookie to the 200-mile distance. That was my first 200 miler plus,
Yeah.
and I had a no sleep plan. I'd never done sleeping before, so I was just doing what I had seen my buddy do at his Cocodona that I paid and crewed with him. So I was so glad that you were like, "Hey, let's slow down, let's take it easy." But when we got to the top of Camp Kippa, or at that aid station, it was snowing. I mean, not excuse me, it wasn't
There's
snowing.
snow
It
on the
had
ground.
snow. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
snow on the ground, and me being a desert rat, it was freezing for me. I was like, this is cold. But I don't know. This is kind of what I was gonna loop this into the story. But did you have to use the restroom at that aid station?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. The Camp Kipka aid station bucket is
Yes.
infamous.
Yeah.
Me and so Jose Sosa was running that race too, and we were
Yeah.
still joking about it here at Arizona Monster when we shared some miles together
Oh,
about
that's so
the
great.
Camp Kippa aid station bucket and how
Uh,
nasty that was. And it was so cold, and like
it
the
was
wind was
so cool.
blowing, and it
But
was just behind the wall. It's like,
yeah,
oh my
but
gosh, it
yeah,
was terrible.
set the stage for it because it's not a
Oh
bucket like off in the distance. So
no.
there's a parking lot and then the front of the building you walk into, and on the side of the
It's
building
just
is where
around
the
the corner.
bucket.
It's around a 90-degree corner. It's not
Yes.
even behind the building. It's just around the corner. And it's like in the wind, right? And like there's nothing to like hold on to, and there's no toilet seat on this bucket, right? It's
No.
just like it's a you got to hover over it, right?
Yes.
And it was disgusting.
And yeah, I
And I
remember
like I
when
was
I
going to use it, and I'm like, nope, that's not going to work for me.
oh see you're I had to go. And so
Yeah,
when I went out there to take care of it, I kind of looked around. I was like, there's no one's, I could see headlights or something. I could see
yeah.
people if they were walking up. And I don't know if they were crew or pacers or whoever they were, or just runners without their headlights on. These two gals just walk because they thought the door was on that end.
Yeah.
So I'm there using the restroom, and these two poor ladies walk up, and I'm like, "Oh, the entrance is over there." And I'm sure they were like, "What is going on?" There's snow on the ground. It was
Oh,
so
I know.
cold, and so if you're out there and you ever hear this, I'm so sorry. That was not planned. I did not intend for that to happen at all. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because man, that threw me for a loop. The snow, how cold it was, the
Yeah.
snow, and then the bucket.
It
I was just
was
like,
it was
wow.
cold. It was cold before we made the climb up to Camp Kippa. Like I remember just going down along Arasta Creek and it was cold down there. I think you got cold down there before we even made the
Oh yeah.
climb. And
No, that's a good point. And another thing that this speaks to who Lance is. I had asked my friend who'd done Cocodona. I said, "What are some tips? Right, you've done it before." He's like, "Listen, at Crown King, make sure you take your winter, like your cold weather stuff." And we're both desert rats, so it's like,
yeah,
got it.
makes sense.
So I went out of there in a hurry, and I didn't grab my gloves. So this is how cool Lance is. We're going along, and you must have seen me getting cold, or I don't know if I said something, I don't remember. But you're like, "Oh, you can use my. I have some socks in my pack. You can use my socks." And almost to that same time, I feel like, and my memory may not be serving me correctly, but I found a glove on the ground. This dirty glove. It was just all dusty and dirty, and so I've got a glove that's not mine on one hand and one of your socks on my other hand. And we're marching up this hill,
Goes on
Um,
forever.
it goes on. Oh yeah. So if you're signed up for Cocodona, don't underestimate the climb to Camp Hit because
Yeah,
that's
harder
that's a
than getting the
nasty
Crown
one.
King.
Yes, it is. It's tough. But I do remember giving your socks back. So if I
Yeah,
didn't, I'll send
you
you a
know,
pair.
the funny thing is, right? So in my first 200, right, I had an extra pair of socks and I ended up having to use them. And so in every 200 since then, I've always carried an extra pair of socks just in case I needed them. But in my second one, Cocodona, with you, I didn't end up needing them for their intended purpose, right? I let you borrow the socks, right, to use as a glove. And in all the 200 since then, I've done, three of them since then. I've never needed these socks. And I'm getting ready for my Arizona Monster. And I'm like, I don't think I need an extra pair of socks. Like, I just don't think it's really that necessary. And I'm like, oh, but like, what if my hands get cold because I was running thinner gloves, right? I can always just use them as like gloves, right? They seem to work really well for Christian. So, so I still carry an extra pair of socks, even though I don't need it. Like I've got my pack streamlined down to just the essentials. I'm kind of an opponent to packing your fears, right? Like I don't like pack what you need, not necessarily what you're afraid to not have out there, right? That's a good way for your pack to just balloon into a monstrosity. Uh, so an extra pair of socks is the only thing I carry that's like a a not a necessity in my pack, and it's just I think about you every time, right? I always think
I
about
love
like you
it.
walking there with socks on your hands, right? And I'm like, but what if I need socks on my hands, right? What if it's that
Yeah,
cold, right? So, or I could use them that. It's like it's just something that it's got multiple uses. So the extra socks, right? That's the only thing that stays in my pack. That's
I
not a
love it.
necessity.
Yeah. Uh, and one of the things that we mentioned before we started recording was uh, when we had met, and then I met up with my crew at Friendly Pines. I was telling him about the because you had taken off by that point and were powering on ahead,
I think
and
when
I
we
was
pulled into Friendly Pines is kind of when we said our farewells or
yeah
something. Because I think
yeah.
you said you were going to rest or something.
So I you were started moving pretty quick, and I said, hey, I'm just going to kind of keep my slower pace and just ease into Friendly Pines and take a little bit more rest than you're probably going to take. And you're like, yep, no worries. And I said, I'll get your socks back to you or something like that. And then you took off. But I was telling my crew, it was my dad and then a close friend of mine about about you. And I was like, yeah, this guy like just came in clutch with his sock and I found a glove on the ground. I can't believe I forgot my gloves. And they're like, where is he? And I was like, oh, he took off. They probably thought I was nuts. Like I was talking to this mystery person for all this time. And so when I saw you later on that during the race at Tut Hill, I was like, Bryce, that's him. And then you're like, hey, good to see you again. And I think your wife was there, and she said hi. And at that point, they were probably like, oh man, I thought he was just losing his mind. This random guy named Lance. So it's pretty cool that we get the chance to visit during this because yeah, I that you did save. I mean, would I have lost my hand of frostbite? Probably not. But that there's nothing worse than being. I do not like being cold,
Nope.
and so yeah, you saved me during that section. So I can attest. Lance is a social butterfly, and he is the sock guy. So if you need some gloves in a pinch, and you find Lance, you got some gloves. Um, so I've got to ask you because I like what you said about the hundreds versus the 200s. Um, Not making this all about me, but I had one of my more difficult 100 milers I did was a local race here called the Mogollon Monster.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And I mean, honestly, that is the only time I've had like real anxiety during a race because it was hailing and the it was this terrible weather conditions and everybody was hiding under pine trees and luckily I was up at a crew station at that point so I spent way too much time in a crew vehicle getting warm and letting the storm blow over, which it took way too long. So I was really close to cutoffs the whole time. And anybody I've ever talked to about 200s, it's like this mammoth thing, right? Like, no way, because even people that do ultra, 100 miles could be a huge distance for them. But I like what you said about the 200s versus the hundreds, because at that experience I had at the Mogollon Monster, it was constant stress, like calculating times, distance to the next aid station, cutoffs. I was so worried the whole time. I finished, and I felt like an okay effort, but you go to the 200-mile distance and you're taking naps, you're spending a little bit more time at aid stations eating. Um, it's a slower pace. Now, I don't know if
Yeah.
someday they bring those cutoffs down as the sport progresses, but it's very interesting, this idea that I'm not saying a 200 is easy. I'm not saying that at all. They're very
No.
difficult, but you alleviate some of those cutoffs worries that you have in some of those more difficult 100s in the 200-mile distance, because you have that extra time. Um,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, have you ever done a really difficult mountain 100 like that and seen a similar comparison?
Yeah, no, I definitely have. What really comes to mind, I ran the Bighorn in 2022, which was my first Mountain 100. I knew I was doing Moab later that year, so I wanted to do a Mountain 100. And 2 days before race day, my kids had been sick, and of course I get sick, right? And it must have been the flu, because I had the fever and the chills and the body aches and the just dying. Like, the Bighorn, it's in Wyoming, and the day before the race, we're driving there, and we stopped in Billings to go to the zoo, and we're walking around the zoo, and I'm walking from park bench to park bench to sit down and rest in the shade, and I could barely walk through a flat zoo, right?
Ugh,
I'm like dying in the heat, right? I'm like, how is this going to even be possible, right? And so I get there, right, and I pick up my packet, and I meet up with a couple buddies that were doing it. And I'm just like, I didn't really tell them, right? I'm like, this is going to be rough, like really bad, right?
yeah.
And I wake up in the morning and I feel great. It's like a miracle, right? I'm like, this is going to be awesome.
Wow.
And it's a later start. It was like a 9 or 10 a.m. start, which I think all ultras should go to a 9 or 10 a.m. start. I'm a huge fan of the later start times. Um, and it was a later start, right? And I feel great. And I get there and I toe the line and I start running. And I'm like, man, this is going to be a great day for a race. And it was hot in 2022. Uh, yeah, it was not a great race. I was only like 3 or 4 miles in, and my heart rate. And if you're familiar with that race, the first 8 mile, or after the first like 2 or 3 flat miles, it goes up for 8 miles, and you get like 4,000 feet of climb in 8 miles. So it really
Ooh.
hits you hard early. And yeah, I was only like a couple miles into the climb, and I'm like having to take a 10-minute break under a rock in the shade. I'm just laying down, trying to get my heart rate to come down. And so I was very much still sick, trying to run a mountain 100, and it was bad. Like, I got into the mile 14 aid station like 2.5 hours later than what I'd told my crew I was going to
Wow.
be there. And like, I'm sitting there, I'm crawling in, right? Like, I thought I was hallucinating because Scott Jurek was there, right? Because his wife was running, and I'm like, I think that's Scott Jurek, but I'm also think I'm dying, so I could be wrong about that, right? And my wife's like, I have no idea who Scott Jurek is, right? They're like, he's so awesome, right? Right? And so like I'm like dying in this chair, and I went back and I looked at the splits that the race had posted afterwards, and nobody who left that aid station after me finished the race. So
Wow.
I was the latest person to have left that mile 14 station that ultimately finished. So I was in the back, like back of the back. Um, and it was pretty rough. Like, I got to the turnaround at mile 48, and I was like 30 minutes ahead of the cutoffs, and 20 minutes there of trying to recover and change my shoes and socks and all that stuff. And I think I was like 10 minutes before final cutoff, right? And I talked to the aid station volunteer. I'm like, hey, I'm feeling like I can do this, right? But I just want to know, like, if I go back out there, am I wasting my time? Like, am I going to finish or am I going to get cut off? Like, I seem like I'm pretty close to these cutoffs. And she's like, oh, no, you're fine, right? Like last year, there was this 60-year-old guy that came in 3 minutes before cutoff and he still finished. You'll be fine, right? I'm like, oh, shoot. Well, I guess I'm good, right? And so I take off, right? And I was starting to feel better at this point, like it cooled off. And I felt like I was running pretty good. And you get down to like I think mile 68 or 65 or something like that, and there's a section called like the wall, and it's just really steep, goes on for a couple miles. And I'm crawling up that, and I'm starting to look at my watch, and I'm realizing that like I'm actually getting closer to cutoff times, despite thinking I was feeling better. And I found a race veteran that was running the 50 miler. She'd run it like 6 or 7 times. So I asked her like, "Hey, how are we doing?" And she's like, hey, if you can, you better run or we're going to get cut off. So I'm like, oh shoot, like let's go, right? So we take off, right? And it's so hot even on day two, and I'm just chugging along, and ultimately I finished the race and as a golden hour finisher. It's the only time I've been a golden hour finisher. It's really neat. There's nothing more special. I think the golden hour is more special in any race than the people that are breaking the tape. Cool, kudos to them. I think it's super impressive, right? But the people who are really impressing me are the ones that are getting their money's worth out there, that are grinding it out at the back of the pack. And I've been there myself. I know what that felt like to be a golden hour finish, right? To finish with 25 minutes left in the race after you've been out there for almost 35 hours. And it's special, right? There's nothing better than knowing that you put it all out there in the most adverse of conditions, right? And you overcame that. And that was like ultimately that was hard. Like the Bighorn was the hardest race I've ever ran. I think that's because I was sick. Like the course is tough. It's a mountain 100, but like uh, mountain hundreds are hard. There's just no way
Yeah,
you got to run, and you can't
yeah,
really be that slow, right? And you can't really waste that much time. Like you got to fix problems sometimes on the go, right? Or if you've got time, right, you still got to kind of be fast about it in an aid station to fix and diagnose those problems. And they can be almost not enjoyable because of how hard they are, or very heavy on the type two fun.
yeah, yes,
But in a 200, like they're hard too, but in like more of a logistical way, or maybe in a mental side of things, right? Or in like a like I think where a 200 really tests you is in your experience, right? Or in your cruise experience if you're kind of newer to that too, right? Like, hey, can we take care of our feet? Can we manage our chafing? Can we stay eating?
yes,
Can we stay hydrated? Right? Can we wrap our head around just going to the next aid station by, oh, I have 150 miles left in this race still. Um, and I think that's where a 200 gets really difficult. But physically, I mean, I'm never stressed about hitting cutoffs. I walked every step of Cocodona 250 except for the last mile and a half. I never ran. And like, I still finished hours ahead of the cutoff and was never even close to them. You
yeah.
can't do that in a 100-mile race or a 50-mile race or even a 50K. Like, you can't walk the entire race. It's just not possible. So, 200s, if the reason why you're not signing up for a 200 is because the distance seems long and scary, like I think you'd be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits I had was I got inoculated to the 200 crewing and pacing a friend of mine 2 years in a row at Cocodona.
Yeah,
So you're able to get a front row seat to how fast they're moving, what's the aid stations like, what's the feel of the race. And it was so different than my experience at that stressful Mountain 100 that I was like, oh, I could do this. I could
yeah,
definitely do this. Because you actually see it versus like I mean, if you watch the live stream at Cocodona, you still might be intimidated, like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you could ever do that. But if you're actually there, you see this. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're moving good. People aren't sauntering in the park or anything, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not nearly as stressful as some of these mountain hundreds, where these cutoffs really come into play. I remember at the end of the Mogollon Monster, I was climbing up this one final. Well, actually, it was the second to last final climb, but anyway, and I saw this guy sleeping, and I was like, dude, if I'm that stressed about cutoffs, there's no way you could be taking a nap. And I
Yeah.
and I was kind, but I was like, dude, I was like, we don't have time to sleep or something. I don't remember exactly what I said, and he's like, oh, I'm just so tired, and it was sad because I was a golden hour finisher, and I watched him come in after the golden hour
Yeah.
closed,
Yep.
and I really felt for him because it's hard. It's really
Yep.
tough. Um, so I'm glad that you brought that up, and we've kind of gone down this road because people do get intimidated by the distance, but logistically, cutoff wise, the speed of the race, the amount of time you have during a 200 to have really low moments and really high moments, it's just a lot more generous than these tighter 100 milers. So
Yeah.
take Lance's advice and really start to think about that if you are interested in those longer distances, because do the mountain hundreds, but
Yeah.
the 200s can be more enjoyable.
A mountain hundred is special, right? You need to
Yes,
go out. Everybody, the world would be a better place if everybody went out and got humbled by a mountain 100.
yes,
It would,
they're tough.
like, so many people would be better individuals if they got their butts kicked on a mountain 100, right? Um, but if you're looking for something that's fun, right, do a 50 mile. I think 50
Yeah,
miles and 50Ks are some of the most fun distance. Like, I love a 50K. Um, like, if I've got nothing going on a weekend and there's a 50K in a cool place, like, I love to just jump into those, right? Um, that's probably one of my most, favorite things to do is go in some place I've never been before and meeting new people, right? In a new place and enjoying a 50K, right? Um, or 50 miles, right? Also a blast. Um, but then it kind of like 100Ks aren't too bad either. Those ones, you can still get to bed and sleep in your own bed that night. 100 miles are hard. It's good for you, but it's hard, right? And then
yeah,
I think 200s are fun though, also. Like you get that return to fun. So, but
yeah. You get
do the
more.
Mountain 100.
Yes, don't let us sway you from doing the mountain hundred. It's definitely worth it. I think back to my experience at my experience at Mogollon quite often, because they're really impactful. You learn
Yeah.
so much, and that's kind of a cliche thing within the ultra scene, but it's because it's cliche because it's true. I think, but where I wanted to kind of go next is, um, we've already kind of been doing this, but what would you say, if you meet someone, they're into running or triathlon, Spartan race, whatever it is, and they let you know, hey, I've been curiously interested in ultras, but I just don't know where to start. What would be some words of advice or tips, tricks, anything along those lines to kind of share with someone that's just curiously investigating ultra?
Yeah, no, I love the people that are ultra curious. Those are
Mm-hmm.
some of my most favorite people. And I don't know how well you know me, Christian, right? But some of my friends here in my running group, I'm probably the more persuasive, peer pressuring type of friends, right? Like every running group, right? There's always the different dynamics, right?
Yeah.
I'm the say yes to an adventure guy, right? The hey, let's sign up for this and let's do this one and let's step out of our comfort zones and swing for the fences on this, right? And so, man, when I meet someone who's ultra curious, it's like blood in the water for me.
Yeah.
Like, no,
I love
I
it.
love it, right? Like, oh, you're thinking about a 50K? Well, I mean, the vibe is so much better if you do the 50 mile, right? And if you really want to have fun, the training's the same, right? This is what we
Yeah.
should do, right? And no, I love those individuals because I think that people don't realize what they're missing, right? The roadies don't realize how fun the trails are, the vibe, the community. It's so much different, right? The relaxed atmosphere. Um, it's just I enjoy bringing people into the community, right? Like say, hey, let's go for a run on these trails. Have you seen this trail over here, right? Like so for those that are interested, right? It's not always possible, but if you can, like do it with a friend or find someone else that's there, right? Chances are that, in my experience, there's not too many douchebags that run ultras. It seems to
Yeah.
screen them out pretty well, right? There's a few out there, but for the most part, right?
Yeah.
If you find somebody that runs ultras and you say like, "Hey, I'd like to go for a run sometime," right? Or pick your brain out on the trails someday, like you're going to probably get a positive response from that. So if you're ultra curious, right? Find someone that has done it and go for a run with them, right? Ask them what their favorite trail is. Ask them about the kind of gear that they're using. Um, Ask them about the times when it didn't work out for them. Everybody likes to talk about the war stories,
Yeah, those are the best.
right? Everybody wants to talk talk about that stuff, right? So just ask people about it, and I think that's really good. I'm a little bit more extroverted, but with the introverts, right? Like all you got to do is ask an extroverted person a question and just sit back and listen to them. So just just give them a little bit of something to get started, right? And just sit back and wait for the stories to come, right? So I don't know if I quite answered your question, Christian, but
No,
it's
no,
just get involved with
that's
the
perfect.
community if at all possible, and it'll
Yeah.
organically grow from there. So, and if you're the kind of person that if you want to run, like if you've been running marathons, road marathons, there's not much of a difference other than a couple extra hours to do a 50K. So find a 50K, sign up for it. Training's the same. Come out and just say hi to every person that you can while you're out there. That's kind of what
Yes.
I try to do. Hey, where are you from? What's your name? Is this your first ultra? Right? Like it's it's too good of a sport. There's too many gems out there to let that gem go running by you without saying hi to them. Like it
Yes.
just it's a missed opportunity.
I agree. I had a when I did triathlon, I it's one of the only times I hired a coach, and I hired him after my half Ironman to train for the full. And one of the things that he would always talk about, and uh, I've adopted, is this idea of positivity. But how he wanted us to do it was to thank the volunteers and also praise other contestants. And how that's helped me is exactly what you're talking about. This openness, this friendliness, this vibe, as they call it these days. That is the really the underpinnings of the community, the ultra community. And when you're out there and you're thanking people who are volunteering, thank you so much for being out here. You guys are amazing. Or, hey, how are you? Do you need anything? Being positive and uplifting to the other contestants, it really changes your race. And I think that's one of the things that people who come from the road scene or the triathlon scene or even the Spartan scene, Spartan's a little bit different, a little bit more open and positive. But I think the people who come from those other two scenes into the ultra world, that's what they get almost baptized into. And they're like, what? Everyone's talking to me.
Yeah.
Everyone
What
is
have I been
nice.
missing?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, like you said, you could ask someone a question, and then 4 hours later, you've been talking to them the whole time, and you know their kids' names and where they go to school, and what they like to do with their time, and all of a sudden, you've made a new friend. And what's been interesting, Lance, is this is a common theme on each episode I've done. When we talk about this, some people have given some details, some tricks and tips, kind of thing, but the overarching sentiment from everybody I've just talked with thus far is this idea of openness, and everyone's accepting, everyone's there to help. Um, I mean, I've seen people like dig into their packs and pull out salt for people, ibuprofen, you know, not that they're drug dealers, but they're passing out whatever they can to help. Do you like you? Do you need a water bottle? Do you need a headlamp on your first ultra? You
Yeah.
got baptized into that scene really early on, and I think that's so important and shouldn't go overlooked because it is one of the reasons I enjoy doing these events, and I've found a lot of enjoyment doing the smaller ones because I still see some of the same people and you're still having a great time and it's the same feel. And like you said, you get to go to bed in your own bed that night. You're not,
Yeah.
you know, trudging through the trees all night. So I like that. That's
Yeah, I mean,
that's
I
perfect.
don't think I'm alone. When I find a race that I want to do or that I've signed up for, I don't think I'm the only one that goes on to Ultra Sign Up and starts going through the entrance list. Like,
Yeah,
who do I know? Right?
yeah,
Where are my friends at? Where are my people? You know? And I do that every time. Like,
yeah.
like where are
Me
they?
too.
Right? And it's crazy now that, once your Ultra Sign Up starts getting bigger and bigger, you start realizing that like starting to know a lot of these people. And
Yeah.
so
I mean, I
it's
that
awesome.
that I love doing that because I saw a lady that I did the Mogollon with. She had a DNF, and I saw that she's doing Sedona Canyon. So I'm like, I don't have her number or anything, but I'm messaging her on Strava. Hey, I see you're coming out. I can't wait to see you.
Yeah.
I saw her at another event, uh, and had the chance to introduce some of my daughters to her, and it's just a really cool. It's so cool that you make these ultra friends, and you may not go to dinner with them or chat with them all the time, but you have that like camaraderie that you have endured something together that's really difficult, and that does build a bond, I think.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to give you a chance to share with us anything else that you have coming up. I know that's kind of funny to ask that, considering you just finished the Monster to
Yeah.
10th place. But do you have any? What are you excited for now? Coming up next? Any
Yeah,
big races coming up?
I do. Yeah. I always am looking on how to fill out my years. Not just this year, but I'm already looking into 2026 as well. No, I love it. There's so many races I want to do. So I'm going to be the next race I've got on the calendar in July. I'm running the Cascade Crest 100, so Mountain 100 here in Washington State. I've paced the back half on it a couple of times. So first time we're actually going to run it. Looking forward to that. And then in August, so next month after that, we were able to secure a Wonderland Trail permit, which circumnavigates Rainier, about 92 miles, 22,000 feet of gain. We're going to do that in
Wow.
3 days. We're going to kind of fast pack style it, which is always fun. There's going to be about six of us in our running group, so we were getting kind of nervous because everybody's like, "Oh, did you get the permit? Nope. Did you get the permit? Nope." Right, and I'm the last guy. Yeah, we got the permit. Right. It's like, oh, thank goodness.
That's
Right.
awesome.
So really excited about that. Going to do that in August, and then in September, doing I'm Tough in Idaho, Mountain 100 again.
I haven't heard of that one. That one sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's Hard Rock Western States qualifier. It's like the name says, it's going to be a beast. It was kind of one of those things, right, where I got into the group text and it's like, hey, thinking about doing I'm Tough, like who's in, right? And there was a couple that were easy to convince and some that were not as easy to convince, but they're signed up now, and a couple more buddies on the other side of the state, right, that um, are signed up for it. So there's going to be about 6 or 7 of us down in Idaho. So doing that in September, and then I'll just throw in the random 50K here or there on the open weekends. Nothing on the books yet. Um, and then I'm going to return to Cocodona in 2026. So,
All
um,
right, right on.
after walking it due to injury in 2023, I think we're going to be able to get a few of my friends here signed up for that. So I think we'll have a group going back down there again. And yeah, I'm just interested to throw down and actually run it and and what I'm capable of doing. And the interesting thing about that is everything that I saw at night and during the day should hopefully swap, so I can
Yeah.
see and experience some different things. So, um,
Well, dude,
yeah, excited about that.
that's a packed schedule. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, so only planned out to 2026, but
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well,
Um,
before we end, I I to express my gratitude for my guests coming on. I mean, I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's an awesome story. I give all my guests a gift from Death March Running Company. So off the podcast, I'll get your address and I'll send you that. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a really cool ultra brand. Um, I love all their stuff, so I like to share that with people. So I'll get your information offline so you don't have any fans showing up at your door.
yeah, no,
You
I
know,
I love new gear and I love new friends, right? If they show up, they might
yeah,
understand that they might get signed up for a mountain hundred.
yeah.
So come
So I'll
by if
get
you
your
want to go for a
details
run.
offline. Yeah, that's great. But Lance, again, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for jumping on and sharing your story. Anything else you want to say before we end?
Oh man, if you're ever up here in the Northwest, dude, like look me up, right? There's a awesome racing scene up here. We've got a local 100 that's always early season in March. For someone coming from Arizona, right, you'd be perfectly trained up for it. It's a really cool course. So if you ever want to do something like that, you got a place to stay here at my house, of
Awesome.
course. But no, if you're ever planning on doing any runs up here in the Northwest, right, or Washington State or Northern Oregon, let me know, man. I'd love to get out
Yeah,
there
I've
and share
been
some
ultra
miles.
curious. I would be awesome. I'm ultra curious about the Northwest. I've only done the 50K at the SOB in Mount Ashland, so
Yeah, and
that's
that's
as
down
far
south.
north.
That's like Southern Oregon.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
that's
not
Southern
even up
Oregon.
here yet.
No, not close enough yet.
So,
So I've been curious about some stuff up there. We can connect offline and maybe you can hard sell me on one of these races.
I've got a list, man. I'll hook you up.
I love it. I love it. Well, Lance, thank you so much. This has been so much fun catching up and swapping some old war stories from Cocodona and hearing your story in more detail. So thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Christian. Thank you,
Yeah.
buddy.
Take it easy. We'll see you.
Yep, you too.